Hey everyone, Ripley Sellers with Bob's Watches. I'm here in the studio with Justin for another episode of Vintage of the Week, where we pull aside one remarkable vintage timepiece and share with you exactly why we love it. Well, Justin, got a cool one here. We're talking about a chrono, so I think we're both wearing timepieces from one of the brands, not the brand we're talking about, but from one of the grandfathers of the chrono.
Absolutely. I'll start us off.
What are you wearing?
Breitling chronograph. I love this watch. It's so nice. I love that OD green dial. I'm a sucker for chronographs anyway. It's a great looking watch, and like I said, I love chronos, and always an excuse to wear one.
What
do you got?
Wearing a Breitling with a green dial as well, but I heard you were wearing a chrono, so I'm not wearing a chrono. Obviously, Breitling, one of the grandfathers of the chronograph complication, but they also make non-chronos, and this one's kind of cool. I like this one a lot.
It's really cool. I like that field watch look to it. Breitling has, they have such a wide grouping of watches and styles and stuff, and a few of them really knock it out of the park. I think that's one of them.
Yeah, underrated. If you kind of like the Navitimer vibe but don't want a Navitimer, it's worth a look.
Very cool watch. All right, should we get into the Daytona we got today?
Not a Breitling chrono
not
at
a Breitling.
All. Rolex chrono.
Yes.
And arguably probably the rarest Rolex Daytona if we're talking about just numbers alone. Maybe not the most expensive or the most famous that people are talking about, but as far as production numbers alone, the reference 6262 is probably takes the cake.
It's in that transitional period, right?
Super transitional. I mean, they only made it for about a single year.
Right.
This example here, 1970, and at a glance, I think why the reason these don't get talked about more is because at a glance it just looks like a 6239. It just looks like the first Daytona.
Exactly, yeah.
Pump pushers, 37 mil case, steel bezel. Nothing immediately jumping out that would make it special, but on the inside, it's a different movement. They were ready for the next gen, Voucher 727, so it's the same movement you'll find in the later gen, but it's, visually speaking, it's very much of the first ilk, and this is a really pretty example as well.
This is a really nice example. It's in really good shape. This one actually is, we got it from the original owner, if I'm not mistaken, right? They have service records. I mean, there's some things they've, had it diligently serviced and, have all the paperwork for that. It has had service hands replaced on it. But yeah, it's a very honest watch, really clean. I mean, it's a great example.
Oh yeah, super honest watch, and when it comes from the family, and why, obviously if it was been a collector done it, would have replaced the hands, but it is such a cool kind of monochromatic watch. Original dial, and I think that's worth talking about here. It's like the blue Daytona dial.
Yes.
If you look really close at the dial text, the Daytona name is kind of in this like grayish blue color.
Yeah.
And it's not like the silver text with the Rolex name up top, and it's not in the same white that you see on the registers. It's kind of its own color.
It's very subtle. It is. It's its own color. When when I first see it, it doesn't scream blue, but when you look at it with the loop, and I explain it as more of like a blue tinted white or a cool white,
And that's precisely why. It wasn't actually supposed to be blue. According to kind of collector knowledge and scholarly, general consensus on it was probably printed white. And over the years it darkened, as you see with so many other vintage Rolex dials, whether it's tropical dials that go rich bright brown or those gold subdials that go Lakers purple. But in this instance, the Daytona name, it's the blue Daytona, and you really only see it on the like the 6262 or the late production black dial variants of the 6239. So super rare within it, and super lucky that when the watch did get its center hands replaced, it didn't lose its style.
Yes, absolutely. That's probably my favorite part about this watch is I love that monochromatic feel to it, right? It's just like all the black and white, and it's got the stainless bezel that's in really good shape. And I love the ones that, you get that red Daytona that jumps out at you. I mean, there's something to be said for that. It's, it's pretty catching. But just the cleanliness and the, just the black and white, and it's got a little bit of patina on it, and God, it's just a beautiful watch.
Yeah, really pretty watch. And I mean, I think the modern Daytona has a lot of dial text relative to what, there's a lot going on there. This, just not having even the Oyster word on there at all, it's just super kind of sparse, and again, not having to pop a red or anything like that, and with really clean service hands, it just looks really clean. Bezel has a little bit of wear, again, a vintage watch, but I mean, it's kind of what you'd want in it, and it's, for those who know, it's like, it's the ultimate insider baseball vintage Daytona reference.
Yeah, it's the kind of, if you know club on it, right? Because like you said, it looks very, very similar.
When you almost have to ask the person, because if I just saw this on someone's wrist, I'd probably assume it's a 6239, just because they're that much more common. The first one out of your mouth is not the one they only made for 1 year.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is one of those ones where it's an inherently cool. I mean, it's a vintage Daytona. It's obviously cool, but like it has that extra added level for those who had the discussion with you.
Right. Yeah. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, that is, if you want something a little bit different, right? I mean, not like everyone has a vintage Daytona, but if you want to set yourself apart a little bit, like you said, they made this for like a year. A little over a year, It's got the different movement. Even though it looks the same, it is kind of, has the special internals. And like you said, it's likely one of the rarest vintage Daytonas out there. Even though it looks similar, this actual watch with this movement and this combination is extremely rare.
Yeah, you really don't see them much, and kind of in the same way that Sea Dweller owners, when someone's like, nice vintage sub, and it's actually a 1665, I could, it's such a special reference, and it's almost one where people just don't talk about it.
Right.
People talk about the 6239, and then they talk about the final gen, like the 6263, the 6265. 6262 is really, really rare.
And you're right, it doesn't get talked about a whole lot. There's not a ton of attention behind it.
Yeah, and I think that's largely because there isn't that visual calling card. You don't have the screw down pushers or something that makes it immediately identifiable, but I think that's kind of what makes it special.
It is kind of what makes it special. I like that.
And Rolex would never do this today. Every new reference that comes out, even if it looks very similar, like the 41 mil versus the 40 Submariners, it's substantially different inside and out. There's all these little tweaks made. It's basically a new movement and then a new reference number, and that's such a snapshot.
Yeah,
of
and I mean,
history.
exactly. That's kind of like the olden days, the Wild West of back when they would do things like that. They new reference, new watch, new movement, looks exactly the same. Yeah, it wouldn't happen today.
They had a superior movement with a higher frequency. It was going to offer better performance. Roll out a new Rolex Daytona reference, but that wouldn't be how things would go today. You can imagine when Rolex is ready for a new movement, whenever the 4130 is done, it's going to be a whole new generation of the Daytona.
It kind of shows you how how the community and how people thought back then, because that was a huge deal. That was apparently all you needed for a new watch and a new model was, it's a superior movement, it's more accurate, it's all these things, and that was enough for people. Where today, they wanted to look different, and that wouldn't quite cut it. So it's really a nice little snapshot into kind of priorities back in this time.
Yeah, the incremental gains, and then they didn't keep it around that long after, because by 1 year later, off to screw down pushers, and it's the new generation of the Daytona and the final kind of evolution of that manually round one. Yeah. Personally, I love it, and obviously it being on a service bracelet also makes it a little bit, gives a nicer presence than the original, original folded link one. And it is available, correct?
Yeah. So like all the watches we feature on the show, it's for sale on Bob's Watches website. So yeah, if you're looking for really cool, really rare Daytona, this one's special. Head to the website and check it out.
Yeah, check it out and check through all the vintage Daytona lore, because it's kind of one of those references that the more you learn about it, the more how kind of unique it is among all of the Daytonas. And I would have a hard time having a vintage Daytona collection without the 6262 in it.
Yeah. It's notable for sure.
Well, that about wraps it up for this vintage Rolex Daytona reference 6262. Don't forget to tune in next time for another episode of Vintage of the Week, and we'll see what we have for you then.